All good? Recorded? Edward, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Manny.
Thanks for navigating through the sea of people and all the different exhibitors that are going on here. We're at live at the CCE, Canadian Concrete Expo. And I've got Edward Skira here from Urban Toronto.
Well, thank you for having me.
I've got a lot of questions for you. I got a lot of interesting conversation that we could have because Toronto's, is it quite the bustling city across Canada? Is it the most active going on right now?
Well, it's the most active in North America. So
North America?
Oh, yes.
More cranes up in the sky in Toronto than New York, Chicago,
yes,
Boston?
Yes.
So what's going on in Toronto here?
Population's going through the roof. So people are coming and the development is happening. So yes, we have something like 350 cranes in the Greater Toronto Hamilton area currently. So there's a lot of work going on.
There's a lot of work for crane ops.
For everybody.
For everybody working in this industry.
Right. So if you're in the trades, if you're a developer or whatever, there is a lot going on.
So I'm looking forward to this conversation because you've got a lot of answers for a lot of questions I'm going to have because you've seen Toronto change.
I have seen Toronto.
Well, we've all paid attention, but you've been paying attention at a different level. Like it's different to be somebody on the outside and just seeing the landscape unfold. You're seeing, I guess, the bells and whistles kind of unfolding.
I'm seeing it every way. So I've always been a construction geek since I was a little kid. My dad got a speeding ticket years ago, and when I was maybe 8, 9 years old, and we went down to City Hall, and there was hoarding on the south side of Queen Street, and he picked me up, and I looked in, and it was the Sheraton Center under construction, and it kind of just blew me away. This hole was huge, and I've been one of those kind of people. You know, there's days. I haven't done it so much recently, but there were days when I was having a bad day at the office, and I'd go out and I'd go watch them pour concrete at some development, and next thing you know, it's an hour because it's like one more bucket. So I'm a bit of a geek that way, right? I just enjoy watching it.
Just watching it unfold and see all the organized chaos, I guess, on the job site.
Sure.
It looks like it's deceiving to somebody who's not familiar with it, what's going on, but there's some organization going on there.
It always amazes me when they're putting up a 60-story building that the walls aren't on the wrong spot or something, right? It's like you're 30 floors up and you realize, we missed something. No, they're really organized, that's for sure.
What's your official title there at Urban Toronto?
I'm the president and co-founder.
Okay, and then you guys basically just feature what's going on in construction all across the Greater Toronto area,
right.
Toronto, Hamilton, all the other cities, and right now I guess Toronto is the number one city. That's the most construction that's going on right now outside, but other cities are growing fast too.
Well, they all are. The spillover from Toronto, it used to be that Etobicoke was Greenfield, and then it was Mississauga, and now it's Milton. And with costs in Toronto for housing, people are moving to Hamilton and Stoney Creek and Niagara even now. It's becoming one massive city. And we track development from Niagara Falls through Kitchener-Waterloo, through Barrie, through Bowmanville, and everything within. So the Greater Toronto Hamilton area and the shoulders.
Now, I mean, we're going to dive, because you brought some images as well, but there's going to be some interesting buildings that you want to make a note of, right?
Sure.
And it's dramatically changed. And I guess I would have seen the first step for me would have been, I guess, City Place back in the late 80s, early 90s. That was the start, I guess, of the construction revolution, where we started seeing 20, 25 towers go up around the Spadina area, around the Sky Dome, what it was called at the time, Rogers Center now. That was like a big amount of construction and probably happened at the same time for the first time in the city.
So I was, there were, you know what, 60s, there was a lot of growth, 70s. Yeah. Toronto is unique because if you go to Chicago, downtown is tall, but you go a couple of miles in either direction and it's flat. All the way out.
Yeah.
But, you go to the suburbs in Toronto, Scarborough, North York, like Bathurst and Steeles, there's 20, 30 buildings that were built in the 60s and 70s, and I have pictures of Steeles, north of Steeles being farmland, and Bathurst being all these apartments. and so Toronto's always had that, and so City Place, I used to live downtown, and I used to go for Sunday walks there, and it was a golf course.
Yeah,
and
I remember that.
I remember when it was marshalling yards, the rail yards, and then all of a sudden the first one went up, and the second one, and the next thing you know, there's 15 or whatever there is, and Queen and Spadina was a dead zone back in the sort of 80s, early 90s when Free trade came in and destroyed the garment industry. It was all empty down there. And today I remember thinking if I had any money, I would buy all of Spadina Avenue, and Allied ended up doing so. So
it would have been a good move at that time.
Sure.
I mean, are you happy with all the new buildings? I'm getting the sense probably in the last 5, maybe 10 years, there's been some really nice creativity coming out of some of the new buildings that are actually being erected now, and I guess they're still on the drawing boards too now, right?
It's a tale of two cities, because there is the sort of mundane stuff that just looks the same as anything else. And then there are definitely developers that are interested in taking it to the next level. And some of the bigger buildings that we've got going up right now are pretty cool. So it really depends on the developer. And I guess, if they're trying to do really inexpensive, then they can't do something fancy. But if they're doing sort of higher end, then they can do a little better with that. Here's an anecdote about Urban Toronto. So one of the major developers, let's say 10 years ago, and Urban Toronto has a discussion forum. So we got about 40,000 registered forum members. They can upload pictures, they can talk. That's how we began, as a community of people talking. And one of the developers came up to me, major developer, and he was like, we are so tired of hearing people complain about our buildings on your forum that we're actually going to put some extra money and effort into the design. And it made me feel really good, because it's like I'm making an impact here. And they did. They really did up their game, and so it's important. And you have to live with these buildings after a while. And if they're all going to look sort of crummy, and it just sort of depresses, you're living in the city, make it look good, So.
There's always an opportunity there, and I guess, is it a matter of we have to reduce design because of budget? Is it a money thing, or I don't think it costs that much more to have some creativity, or does it?
It does.
It does, eh? Because I start seeing what happens is a lot of money's being spent on the first, second, third floor. You get some interesting details for the entrance of certain structures, but then it kind of gets repetitive and simple towards the top, right?
There is a reason why there's a lot of green glass, blue glass towers. That's like the cheapest common denominator in terms of glass. If you wanted to do red or orange or something outside of that, it's more expensive. So they're putting up 40 floors, and they got to make their numbers. And I see it all the time, renderings that look one way, and then the great cheapening comes in.
It always bothers me, because you always get excited about certain renders, and then you're like, okay, I'm looking forward to seeing that structure in person. And I guess one render that everyone's probably familiar with, but it wasn't really laid out all that well, was, I guess, nicknamed Marilyn Monroe Towers, right, in Mississauga.
The Absolute Towers.
Right, the Absolute Towers, And I just know that a lot of people that I knew that actually bought or lived in there, it was a difficult living pattern. Like, it wasn't, it looked beautiful on the outside, but it didn't make sense. And I've never stepped in, I've never looked at it. I've seen some of the layouts, the floor plans. What were your thoughts on that building when those two buildings were going up?
Great idea. But you're building in downtown Mississauga at that time, you couldn't charge what you could. That's one thing. Round buildings are difficult to live in. There's a column, all of a sudden, and what do you do with that space? And if the unit's 600 square feet, and you're losing 10, 20 to a column so builders have to deal with that too. And, they realize if they can make a piece of art on the outside, but if the people inside are suffering, then there's a trade-off there. And if the units were 1,200 square feet or 2,000, then you can lose a little bit here and there for the design perspective. So I haven't seen any of the units inside. I've seen others in places, and it's kind of difficult to work with a small space if there's curved windows, and you can't put furniture against that because it's round, and
What are some of the favorite buildings that you have, that you've seen Toronto come up with? It doesn't matter, old, far older, or even modern ones today.
My favorite building in the city is the TD Center, the original black.
Oh, the original is beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah, the three towers? Or
there was originally 3, but there's 5, 6, 7 now. They kind of spread.
Oh, they started adding
and they
on.
had different architects. They kind of looked the same as the original, but they were off in terms of detail. But those first ones, Scotiabank, but
I remember Scotiabank. That was built in late 80s?
Yeah.
That went in the late 80s. That's the step pattern that they had, which was kind of interesting.
And it's got that reddish, marble-ish, whatever stone that they're using.
Yeah.
Bank towers the banks were trying to make statements, so they were willing to spend the money to build great architecture, which contrasts against developers that are trying to build something that's affordable or fairly affordable. They just can't do that. But those are definitely two of my favorites. There's some older ones at Yonge and St. Clair that are co-ops. I mean, I'm a modernist kind of guy, so I kind of like the sort of simple 60s vibe for a lot of these buildings.
Yeah.
Science Center, which is now threatened, is something that I really like. And
What's the proposal there that they're going to be doing now? Is it a tower? Or no, a few towers, isn't it?
well, the province wants to move the Science Center to Ontario Place and then tear down the existing Science Center and put housing up.
That makes no sense. I
Right.
mean, we've got an established, grounded, everyone knows the Ontario Science Center.
Right.
Like, they know where it is. They
Right.
know what that building is. They know what
Right.
it looks like.
Right.
Why would you want to just... Well, that's Toronto.
No, that's the province.
It's the province that's doing...
Because,
because they're getting the provincial support.
The city doesn't want this to happen. The province is kind of imposing it, and I think it's just a knee-jerk reaction. The province is looking for housing. They have 1.5 million, and that's a fairly big lot.
Yeah.
But I mean, really, if you even put 20,000 units there, is that really going to solve the issue? There's a bigger way and a better way of solving the housing crisis than picking a couple of sites here and there and topping up as much stuff as you can.
I guess, Edward, you'd be probably privy to this, but I'm assuming there's been conversations about just adding more land into the harbor front. Is that a possibility, or are we going to start infringing on the island people?
I don't think the island people have a lot of say because they don't actually own their properties, and they've got a sweetheart
Well,
deal.
they always have a loud voice when it came to, I guess, the island airport and then
Sure,
Porter
sure.
doing the expansion.
Sure,
So,
sure.
But I mean, I guess that's the go-to when you start getting an urban influx of people wanting to be in the core, but there's no land. What do? You start adding land.
So back in the day, when they didn't have environmental standards like today, when they built the Danforth subway, Bloor Danforth, they dug it all up and just threw it in the lake. Leslie Spit is exactly
Is
that.
that.
You can't really do that now. They got to clean it. They got to do this. So most of I would continue going out into the lake for sure, but it's a lot more expensive these days. Not that trucking it up to Stouffville or wherever they dump the dirt is cheap, but it is what it is. So, yeah, I don't. And you know what? There is a lot of land in Toronto that's underutilized. It's just zoned in a way that you can't do anything with it.
Yeah.
I live on a street with single-family houses. Two people, you're building these monster homes with 2 people in it. You could have 12 people in that house with 5 apartments. You do that across the whole city, you cover a lot of that.
But that's what Toronto used to be like. I grew up as a
Yes.
kid on College in Dufferin in a
Yes.
house that was probably no wider than 15 feet.
Yes.
That classic Toronto gable,
Yeah.
I love those homes, right?
Yeah,
And now it's an architect's office, and
Right.
it's been re-bricked because it was original Ontario brick or whatever it was.
Right.
But it's just... that was a big house, in my opinion. And
Right.
it was 5 of us, 5 kids. You know what I mean? It was 7 people living in that house.
I lived on Atlas at Vaughan down by St. Clair. When we came here, my uncle lived downstairs. We lived upstairs. My other uncle lived across the street with
Yeah.
another family. And then they all made a little money and they all took off.
But
and
we
bought their own
never
house.
thought it was not enough space.
Sure.
We always thought it was comfortable.
Yeah,
It
wow.
felt like a home.
It's changed.
It's changed dramatically. And I know that you probably know this. We're getting the highest building. Is starting construction soon, or it's been proposed?
Okay, so, and it'll be in the presentation.
Yeah, you want to try to... We could try to find it because I want to share that. But what's the building that's going to be doing?
So there are 2 super talls under construction right now in Toronto, and a third is about to start. And super tall means 1,000 feet or higher.
Okay.
So we have 0 right now.
In perspective, just let people know. Bank-wise, if we're going Scotia, you going BMO, how tall are they?
BMO is 997.
Oh, so we're just going.
It was 3 feet or 4 or 5 feet away from being 1,000 footer, and people on our forum were always upset. Why didn't it go another 10 feet? Just to. But and it doesn't.
Here's
mean
the cost.
anything.
That's why
Right.
we didn't go.
Well, no, they could have. But,
Okay.
but when they were building it, were they really thinking, well, we got to get 1,000 feet? It didn't matter.
No.
So currently we have 2 under construction. We have Pinnacle 1 Yonge, which is where the Toronto Star building was.
Yep.
The Toronto Star's not there anymore, but that one's going to be 1,050, give or take. My numbers aren't exactly right. And then at Yonge and Bloor, the one, which Mizrahi's building,
Yep.
which is now around 50 floors. It's about it's just over halfway. You can see it sort of popping up in the city, and it's like, it's not impacting the skyline just yet, but it's got another halfway to go. So it'll be just over 1,000 as well. So there's those two, and then Forma, which is at King West, right by Metro Hall there, the Royal Alex Theatre in that complex, and that's Great Gulf. They're going to be over 1,000 with one of the two towers there. So
it's going to become the norm now. Just get over 1,000.
So, you know what? Leave it until the presentation, because I actually I talk a little bit about heights and how they've sort of transitioned over the years. Yes, it is getting taller.
But we have to. Right? Do we not need those extra floors? I mean, these are housing taller, right?
You can go to London or Paris, and they don't have a lot of tall buildings, but their densities are way higher than ours. You can go to Rome. So
that's a good point.
It's what we expect. Like, again, my single family street, lots of space, big backyards, big front yards, 3 people in a house that's 4,000 or 5,000 square feet, and like, you could squish them in if you really wanted to. And it's to me, it's always funny that people want to go to Rome because they love the old school whatever, but would they allow that here? Well, they don't currently.
No, they don't do that. And that's what's envious about European, I guess, is that they set a standard and everyone kind of fits on that level, and all they do is they focus on what you said, density, instead of whoever's the tallest at that point.
Right. Whereas in Toronto, because you can't build in most neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Like, again, in the early days, you could build a 3-story walk-up with 6 apartments anywhere, really.
Yeah.
But then they changed the zoning where you couldn't do that anymore. So it's either you build nothing there's an area on the zoning map called the Yellow Belt, and that's all designated as single-family dwellings.
Okay.
That's it. Now, they changed the rules recently to allow 4 units per house. So they are sort of moving towards that, where you can now, instead of building one monster home, you can build 4-unit, 2-story, whatever. But before that, you couldn't build in the Yellow Belt, so you build in this area zoned for high-rise. So it was either high-rise or 2-story. So that's a function of planning. That's a function of what the cities allow. And, the problem is people who live on my street are not going to want a 6-story walk-up next door.
They don't want to need that, yeah.
But we got to look at the greater good too, and where are people going to live? A lot of these older neighborhoods are depopulating because kids have moved out and the parents are, getting older, and they're
families are getting smaller.
Sure.
The necessities, I guess, for schooling and all kinds of community things are all shrinking.
Sure.
Are you seeing a lot of headaches happening? I guess because the province had, and also the city had, the great idea of changing the rules regarding the dwellings. So now you're getting 4 dwellings on one property. You're getting laneway homes going on.
Right.
But are you getting a lot of people just having a lot of red tape to get these things approved, to get moving forward, to build these dwellings?
So I'm not a developer, but I've heard anecdotes from people who've said it takes just as long to put up a 4-story building through the planning process than it does to do a 50. So if the paperwork is so onerous and you've got to put an elevator in maybe or whatever, like for a 4-story, 5-story walk-up in the old days, elevators, but now you have to do all sorts of things that maybe you didn't do before. It makes it harder, sure.
It makes it a lot harder.
Sure, if you're going to spend, and I don't know what a 3-story walk-up would cost to build, but if you're going to put in the same work, you're going to make a lot more money on a 50-story build. Why not just not worry about the little ones, right? So
it's changing. There's a lot of work going on. There's interesting things going on, but there's a lot of opportunity too, right?
Oh, it's huge.
It's huge right now in Toronto. Toronto's like almost an epicenter going on. Everyone's paying attention to it.
It's been nonstop since way before I was around. Other than, sort of the 90s were a bit of a slow time, certainly with high-rise type buildings. When we started in 2002, a 20-story proposal was excitement. Now if it's not 70, 80, 90, it's ho-hum. And a major change. So 80s, big boom. 90s, recessionary, basically, because of the big boom they'd overbuilt. And then finally in 2000s, they started again.
What would you like to see, Edward, in Toronto, building-wise? What would you like to see that you've seen benefited in other countries, other cities, major cities?
We'll go back to the density thing, but I like walkable cities.
Yeah, discovering.
And I'd like organic growth, which we don't have. Let's talk about, let's say, Yorkville. Like, Yorkville was single-family, essentially, housing up until the 50s. It was row houses.
Yes.
But there was no rules, so if somebody opened a coffee shop, somebody opened a this or a that, it became sort of the hippie mecca with clubs and all that. Then it became sort of the high-end place that it is now. It organically grew, and it feels organic, whereas in my neighborhood, my office is Yonge and Finch. It's like there's a ring road along the downtown, the main where the buildings are, the tall buildings are, and then across the street is just single-family houses. You can't do anything. It's not organic. There are neighborhoods, a lot of these new downtowns, where they're putting 50, 60-story towers. Downtown Vaughan. But it's all new buildings. You're not going to find a mom and pop at the bottom of those stores or those buildings because they're just too expensive. It's going to be, a drugstore, a pizza,
it's going to be a necessity.
A Subway,
yeah.
and it'll be the same 5 chains, a bank. So
it's not walkable.
Well, it's not walkable, but there's nothing to walk to other than those couple things. So if you live on St. Clair, if you live on and any of these streets that have the old retail, there's a mix of stuff, and there's older stuff, and you can get interesting stuff as opposed to shoppers. People need shoppers, but if it's just shoppers in a bank, it's not a community. It's just it's a vertical mall, essentially.
What have you certain communities across Toronto, I guess in other parts as well, that you've seen pleasantly change that you didn't think would change all that well? They and me personally, I would say that it's almost like Leslieville has actually dramatically changed quite a bit since what I remember it from. And it seems to be getting better, but I don't know what other parts of the city that you're thinking.
Canary District. I lived at St. Lawrence Market for many years.
Beautiful area, yeah.
Right, but you went a block, and it was kind of a dead zone,
yes.
all the way to the DVP,
yes.
all the way down to the rail corridor. Go down there now; it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's like there were no banks, there were nothing. There was nothing. And
they kept the heart of that community there.
Sure, and they planned it properly,
yes.
and it's not all high rises. There's a few. I mean, the distillery was empty when I moved down there. Now it's it's a center of, and it was really well done. And they kept the heritage buildings. They filled in all the parking lots, and and there's certainly like Liberty Village was kind of
yes.
a dead zone too. Even Queen Spadina, the Well, and all that.
Yeah.
City Place, City Place could have done a little better on the ground, but it's created vibrancy where there was nothing.
The Well's quite the transformation.
Oh, sure.
Like insane transformation. I mean, it's actually, I would say beautiful. Yeah. I like what they've done. Yeah. I remember what it was, the Globe Mail, right?
Right.
And how it was treated and how it was set up for other things, but it's pretty impressive now.
Oh yeah. No. I went down when it was still under construction, but and it was cold and there was nothing open. But it's still, the architecture's great, and they tried to have different styles mix in. It wasn't all one thing, and they've done a great job with it.
Have they completely abandoned? I remember when John Tory was the mayor, he was talking about that park that they were planning over the actual rail system. They've abandoned that completely, right?
I don't know if they've. Well,
there's no talk about it anymore.
Well, first of all, stupid expensive, and
yes.
secondly, I think they lost to the developer that purchased the land above, so they were trying to force the developer to hand it over to them, and I don't think that's going to happen. So they'd have to buy them out, and I guess there's no budget.
There's no budget for that.
Right.
What do you want to show some stuff here before we get quickly to wrap up? Because I mean, I got to get you back on. We're going to get you back on and talk more stuff because there's always something interesting going on in Toronto.
All right, so let's go to the next slide. So this is just an overview of what we look like. This is our homepage. We do 5, 6, 7 stories a day. Key stats. About 2 million page views a month, about 300,000 unique visitors a month. The interesting thing here is that about 1/3 of our readership is in the business one way or the other. So we have a very strong community of people, about 100,000 that are either brokers, developers, architects, suppliers, so forth and so forth. So a lot of people in this hall today. I just briefly walking through on the way here, I saw a bunch of my clients, and so it's we don't track anything but development. That's all we write about. That's all we talk about.
Is it a young person's game these days? Are they a lot of the younger generation getting into this development, urban, any all facets of construction?
Oh, sure.
It is, right?
Sure,
You're seeing a huge population of
Sure.
that coming in.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so So Urban Toronto Pro is a product. Yeah, I can go to the next page. So this is our coverage area. This is we track about 4,800 projects right now.
Crazy.
And we track basically every new application to every one of these cities on a daily basis. So if there's a new application on the City of Toronto website right now, we will know about it in a couple of hours. We create a database for it, and we track about 90 fields for each project. So height, GFA, who the developer is, who the architect is, and so forth. So this is our premier product. This is what subscribers get access to all this data, and they can slice and dice the data, create reports that they can download, Excel files and stuff like that. So, and we track about 8,000 companies in our database. So these are the companies that build these buildings, own these buildings, and so forth.
How many unread emails do you have right now?
100, I don't know. Okay, we can move on.
Insane. Okay.
So we're going to talk. So we talked a little bit about this earlier. So when we started Urban Toronto in 2002, there were 7 buildings over 500 feet.
Okay.
Period. There were no 1,000-footers. That was it. And today there are 318 buildings that are going to 500 feet or over that are under construction, proposed, or complete across the entire area. So look at that number in 20 years. Now, they're not all built yet, but there's certainly hundreds that are under construction or complete. That's the change in the Toronto area. Right, and then you look at the buildings over 300 meters or 1,000 feet, the super talls. In 2002, First Canadian Place, like I said, was 998 or whatever it was. Today we have 7 proposed under construction or completed. There's none under completed, but 2 are under construction, and the 3rd is about to start. So that's also enormous.
That's amazing. Wow.
And there's a list of the buildings we're talking about. So Pinnacle 1, 344 meters. The 1, 328. 1,200 hasn't been approved yet. Forma, there's 2 towers at Forma. The first one is lower than this in terms of height. The second tower will be 308 meters, and the first one's under construction. The second one hasn't started yet.
Same.
So you want to look at the history again. So this is Humber Bay in 2005. So I took this picture 20 odd years ago.
What's it look like now?
So look at that cluster on the left there.
Wow.
It's just amazing. So next one.
20 years.
So this is Confederation
Mississauga.
Park in
Yeah.
Mississauga.
Okay.
So this is 2009, and look at it today. It's like it's a whole different world, right?
It's amazing. Yeah, there's lots of structure.
So this is Canary District. This is
Wow.
Front Street back in 2005. This was all old industrial, and that's what it looks like today. Like complete change, and this is what I like. It's walkable. It doesn't have to be stupid tall.
But we could still see some more density. Like we could still see
more.
This is very good. Yeah.
And there's the well. We talked about that,
Yep.
and that was a car dealership and the Globe and Mail, and now it's a whole community. And I don't know how many units and stuff, but it's pretty impressive.
It's a lot. Yeah.
And the architecture, is good. There's Forma, next one.
So that's Forma. That's proposed.
So this one, the shorter tower is under construction, and the taller one hasn't started. So this is Frank Geary, who designed the art gallery, and he's a Toronto boy who ended up in LA and did the Guggenheim in
LA.
Spain and Spain.
Oh yeah.
So this is his sort of,
It's going to change. If you've left Toronto and you have not seen Toronto in 20 years, you won't recognize Toronto.
Right. Lucky we have the CN Tower. That kind of sticks out and gives you an idea of where you are. So this is the one.
Yeah.
This is Yonge and Bloor. There's what it's going to look like and the under construction pictures. This one's Norman Foster's, who's the famous British architect. And look at the base. I've been in there. I did a construction tour. The ceilings are 40 feet high, and the columns on the outside are holding the building up. There are no columns inside the retail space.
So basically the aesthetic grid that's on the outside is a structural grid.
That's the structural grid that's holding up the building. There are no columns on the inside, and you walk into that space, and it's double the height of this probably, without a single column in the middle. And that was supposed to be a computer company, and I don't know if it still will be, but...
that was supposed to be up, yeah. That was supposed to be orange.
we call it that when the fruit company moves in. It was the banana guys.
Something happened there.
Right.
It's good. It's a good-looking building, though.
And there is, this is going to be the tallest, so it's under construction now. So this is Pinnacle International. I think they're from Vancouver. And this is One Yonge Street. And in the rendering shot, it's the tallest one. This is the one that...
Look at that. Look at that. That's Toronto right now.
There you go.
Anything else you want to share before we wrap it up?
I think I'm good. I don't know if there's any more slides. I think that might be it.
I think that was it. We'll end it on that one. Edward, thank you so much for sharing a little bit. It was just a tease because I know that we're going to have more conversations about the ever-changing urban Toronto landscape, basically. But I really appreciate you stopping by. Everyone check them out at www.urbantoronto.com.
.ca.
Oh, sorry. www.urbantoronto.ca. That's it. I think